Hello, Stellar Honeys. Today's bonus episode deviates from regular programming. It's just you and me today. I wanted to take some time and share my personal journey, as complex as it has been, and give you some insight into my Saturn return, how it shaped me, how Chiron, the asteroid, also known as the wounded healer, is so prevalent in my natal chart and my story. Also my journey into becoming an astrologer and how my health has suffered because of it. Okay, let me digress. So looking after my mind and challenging my worldview has always been a significant driver in my life, alongside my body and how I take care of it and why I'm so obsessed with my health. But spirit and my relationship to my higher self is something that has continued to evolve, especially after leaning into this work over almost 6 years. And how everything is connected to astrology for your higher self. But if you're already thinking, why the need to share all of this with you in today's episode? Well, if we're Instagram friends, you may know I went through my progressed new moon last week. And your progressed chart, which is one of the main charts I use when I'm forecasting for somebody, gives us a lot of insight as to what area of your life is in the spotlight, how do you feel about it, where are you at in your larger cycle of life, and what needs to be expressed in your world. And a progressed new moon is a significant event which only happens every 29 years. Think of it as a fresh start, a new beginning. It's a celebration of everything that I've achieved. But it's also an opportunity to wipe the slate clean. I share this with you today as an opportunity for you to get to know me better, so that we can both step forward into new territory, because between you and I am not one to look back. So I'm going to start at the beginning. Let's backtrack to baby K. The life that I live today is vastly different than who I once was. Growing up in New Zealand, I battled with addiction. I have Neptune conjunct my South Node, and that can point to old soul energy, but it can also point to escapism. Remember, our natal charts are a mirror, a reflection of our soul, but it's up to us how we use them or choose to use them to express ourselves. And my escapism tendencies were really strong. I don't talk often about my drug and alcohol dependencies much these days, purely because, yeah, they're a part of my story, but I don't allow them to define me. But anyone listening who has struggled with addiction in any capacity knows that there's always an underlying cause as to why there's a choice to escape. And for me, I didn't feel good enough. And that didn't just stop and start with the alcohol and drugs through my addictions. I abused food, my relationships, and also my body. But we do get to a point in our lives where we're old enough to take responsibility. I call it like radical responsibility. That's when we can't blame our parents anymore. Sure, I have a fractured relationship with one of my parents, but I also see these heavily ingrained aspects of who I am, my character, in the story of my natal chart, which I'm going to give you some more insight into soon. But fast forward to my Saturn return, which is when everything changed for me, which, like clockwork, I woke up on my 28th birthday. I cannot make this up. I had an out-of-body experience, and most likely it was prompted by the awful hangover. I remember being in my apartment. I had some friends that had stayed over. I had slept on the couch because I didn't even make it to my bed. And I just experienced this wave of shame and I think sadness for who I had become and how I was living my life. And I was such a functioning addict as well. And I didn't have the drug dependencies I did as I was younger during this time, but I definitely had a lot of low self-worth, no self-love whatsoever, and I definitely loathed myself. And in that moment, I made a silent declaration to myself that I would be forever changed. I vowed that the self-destruction had to end, and that starts and stops with me. So how that manifested was my health. I didn't eat gluten, dairy, or drink alcohol for 2 years. So I was completely sober. I dabbled in celibacy. In that time, I found the gym. I fell in love with taking care of myself. But like all things, my addictions just changed. I still have, to this day, a very addictive personality. And look, even looking back in hindsight now, at least I was using it for the better. I fell so in love with my health. And I think it was because it gave me a sense of control. I could see results. There were like KPIs attached, because prior to that, I was overweight, like a lot. And I'm definitely going to share some images online, just in case you haven't seen them before. But anyway, I fell in love with health so much that I did a 3-month prep with my personal trainer, and I decided to compete in the INBA. It was so big back in the time. Bodybuilding was becoming such a thing. And in 2014, I competed as a bikini competitor. Now, this moment is significant on my journey, and you've likely had some significant moments too. For me, I manifested stepping on that stage every single day, and I was the one that made that happen. Even looking back at photos during that time, I had affirmations on my mirror. I remember writing love notes to the universe and myself and putting them under my pillow. Like, that's really where my manifestation journey began. I think it was more so the connection I had with my higher self, the connection with the universe, the divine, my soul. Now, the thing is, before this moment, I hated my body and I hated having my picture taken. But that moment in time, it gave me just a small kernel of confidence, which is what I was looking for. Sadly though, right, just because I'd achieved this body that I'd never had before, I still didn't think I was good enough. And what happened was that what I didn't know at the time is once you achieve this milestone moment, something that I'd been working towards, even though I'd trained with my personal trainer for 12 weeks, essentially, like, I'd been in the gym for a couple of years prior to that. And what happened is I felt so lost after that moment. I couldn't ascertain what comes next. And I already had some things in my work life that were a frustration. And I kept coming to this place of, is this it? So I then signed up to do another competition. But what happened, because the universe is always guiding us, is I was overtraining, and that actually led to a horrific injury. This injury, I had to learn how to stand up and sit down and walk without pain, which took me a year with an osteopath, which is a whole other story. But on this path of my personal power, my reclamation of self, I still felt really lost. And after 10 years working with Estee Lauder companies, I decided to move interstate. I decided to move to Melbourne. I jumped ship to Sephora to open their 3rd store in the country, because I thought that those were band-aids that would help and fix what I was feeling inside of me. I thought that new job, that new location would get rid of the feeling I had, which is this it? Well, you and I both know that that feeling didn't go away. I absolutely loved my time in the beauty industry. I have Venus conjunct my sun, so beauty, a work of art, great poetry, a song that moves me, or putting on a great lipstick or painting my nails gives me a great source of satisfaction. When I worked at Sephora, I am completely transparent. I love the Sephora family I worked with, but it was absolute chaos. We definitely operated like a startup in the beginning, but I wouldn't trade the experience I had with them for the world. Even though I was so lost and that I hadn't found my purpose, and I was actually in an ending cycle astrologically, which I wish I had known, I became more confident as a person, and I was exposed to opportunities that some would only dream of. Even though I only spent 3 years with Sephora, it absolutely felt like a decade because of the sheer pace that we worked at. But because I did feel so disconnected from who I really was, I was trying to find my place in the world. And so there's 3 crucial pieces of my puzzle that I need to share with you because they're a big part of who I am today and they've shaped me. And it's so interesting now looking back, like how I lean on them in a completely different capacity than what I thought at the time. So the first one is, I actually studied nutrition. I studied with a company called MP Body at the time, and they were a nutrition course for personal trainers. I hadn't studied personal training at all. They had an approach called metabolic precision, which was a holistic approach to health. I think at the time I was grasping at straws. I love nutrition. I'd looked at a whole lot of different options, and for whatever reason, I felt drawn to this at the time. But what happened was I fell in love with food for the first time, because prior to that, food to me was fuel. When I competed, I was eating the same thing every day for 12 weeks in 3-hour blocks, which if you look at any of the scientific evidence today, it is definitely not the case to how to live from a place of vitality. But I learned how to nourish my body. And that was like the first piece of the puzzle. But I quickly realized after that that I was still so hungry. And I have 4 planets in Sagittarius. Of course, like I'm a lifelong learner in this lifetime. Again, didn't know that at the time. I then went on to study my certificate in personal training. Because again, I'm coming back to this place, is this it? And my vision at the time, because I was working out in the gym, I was going to a local bar studio that I loved, that I thought by studying personal training, I would open up my own bar studio. By this time, I'd spent like 6 or 7 years living as this healthier version of myself. So I thought learning this would be my thing. And guess what? I wasn't obsessed with it enough to feel called to pursue it. I realized that that wasn't the path for me and it didn't light me up. So I landed on something else, and I landed on life coaching, as that was the next big investment I was bound to make. By this time, I'd spent close to $15,000 on these separate pathways, but I don't regret any of them. I'm such an advocate for adult education, which I should be based on my background in the beauty industry and learning and development. I always believe like any type of adult education, it's going to give you something. It's always going to lead you somewhere, even if it's not where you initially anticipate. So I studied life coaching, and it gave me incredible ways to connect with people, ask questions, understand what a coaching practice should traditionally look like. But I knew very quickly that that wasn't my place in the world and something was missing. This is when astrology would officially find me. But there's a few things that I failed to mention. I studied a crystal healing certification between landing on astrology, and also I was always obsessed and attracted to space and the stars. I always believe, like, if you're ever at a crossroads, you're searching for meaning and purpose, look towards your childhood. There will be clues that your childhood holds. And I remember as a child having glow-in-the-dark stars on my ceiling in my bedroom. I used to stare up at them and make wishes for hours. Look, to be honest, I was probably wishing to meet Peter Andre, which I actually did. That's another story for another time. But I was fascinated by the world that was above us. And like any journey in life, the best ones aren't easy or linear. I now realize that during those dark night of the soul days, I was meant to be frustrated by my reality. I was meant to move to Melbourne and then move to Sydney and continually question, is this it? And by the way, if you ask yourself that question, it means something is missing, and it is absolutely a good thing, because it means that there's something that you need to explore, uncover, discover, or find. I've met people before that don't ask themselves that question, even though they're destined for more, because they love the feeling they have when they're sitting in their comfort zone. We're all in our own journey, and not even that is wrong, but asking yourself, is this it, means that you're destined for more. All of these moments in my life are what I call those celestial breadcrumbs, and I believe that's what the universe was dropping for me. Because without that dark period of time, I wouldn't have been told by my country manager at Sephora to go and see a particular psychic. I wouldn't have met her, and the first thing she asked me was my birth date, and then looked up my natal chart the traditional way, which was using an ephemeris. I wouldn't have picked up my first proper astrology book and instantly felt an ancient knowledge similar to a knowing, and I wouldn't ever have arrived at the place I am today. I truly believe in hindsight they were all signs the universe sent me. But like all signs, we ignore them, we rationalize them, and then my path was less than smooth. Even though I had the courage to quit my corporate job in the training team in Sephora Australia, which I did the day I received the promotion that I'd been gunning for the last 12 months. Funny that when something that you think you want actually arrives, that's your sliding doors moment, waiting for you to make your boldest, audacious decision. Even though I had the courage to leave Sydney and move back to the Gold Coast and then decide to start a company, I still didn't feel confident enough that I would make it. Even the first 2 years offering astrology in my business, which more people came to me for astrology than coaching, I still question it because sadly I was conditioned to resist it. Not by my parents or friends, but by society. I'm not here to go into that today, but some people are curious by what I do and others will look the other way. The difference now is that I'm obsessed with what I do and I wouldn't trade it for anything. I know in my heart that I show up every day and I give it my all, and the right people will always find me. This is my life's work. So there's a crucial part to the story I've left out, and it's this. Building a company is hard. No matter what anyone tells you to believe. No one tells you you'll work more than any corporate job. No one tells you that it doesn't matter what experience you have to start at the bottom. It takes patience, grit, resilience, hope, and also a shit ton of faith. As the company is turning 6 this October, my astrological work that I'm here to contribute to the world, it's a milestone I'm so damn proud of. But my health has suffered immensely. I have a Leo ascendant, which is the highest constitution in medical astrology. So to give you an example, I wake up, I'm an Energizer bunny, and I go all day. I push through so many physical manifestations and ailments, and even turning 40 last year wasn't why my health was suffering. It was because of what I'd done to my body during this time in my business, and my body finally needed to catch its breath. I've achieved so much in my industry in such a short span of time. I have compressed my timeline immensely in an industry that's built on trust and results, and I don't regret any of it. But what it has given me is perspective and also a new way forward. You could say I became obsessed with health, through an astrological lens back in 2022, which was when I started diving into medical astrology. I have poured over so much work in the medical astrology realm, which is so crazy. We only stopped using it 200 years ago. And I get it. Modern day science and Western medicine absolutely has its place. I absolutely love, if you're curious about medical astrology, Kara Sutherland's work. She's an incredible medical astrologer, and I always go to her work. And I started poring over so many of her lectures, all of the lectures I could get my hands on. And I started seeing my body, my mindset, and my relationship with my soul in a new way. But I can be a slow learner at times, which is why I had some health challenges that I needed to overcome first. But up until this point in 2022, astrology was always intellectual to me. It was about translating, decoding, because I see it as a language, not a belief system, and I always let my Mercury placement lead the way. But after joining some hugely significant dots, like in 2020 when I needed an iron infusion because my iron was so low, I think it was 0.3. What I didn't realize is that the Chiron conjunction to my moon in Aries in the 8th house, so Aries is ruled by Mars and Mars rules iron, that was one of the astrological insights, call it a cue, that was prompting me to make a change. Or the adrenal fatigue I experienced last year and the dysbiosis that had me bedridden between clients for 9 weeks. Hi, Saturn. Another reminder to slow down and pay attention. Or just to keep things really interesting for you, just because the last 12 months had me reassess everything, a small yet mighty aspect during eclipse season this year had me again overdoing it. And a few days later, I had a bulging disc. High sciatic nerve pain that I've still been healing. These are all messages. Call them whatever you want. I see these as messages from my stars, and I've had lots in my lifetime, and likely you've had some too. I think I'd need a solid year to sit down with everything and write it all down in a book if I was to make a record of them. But that's why I love sharing with you as often as I can, that the stars aren't here to govern us. They're here to guide us. They're always helping us to get where we need to go. So what are the changes I've made since my life felt like it turned completely upside down, which I can still remember the date. It was October 13th, 2023. Yes, a warning in itself, because it was Friday the 13th and my health came crashing down in a crumbling heap. But I went back to basics and poured everything, every spare moment I had into learning more astrology, more medical astrology, and also looking at these patterns in my natal chart. I've looked at how to support my nervous system in better ways. I designed nutrition programs specifically catered to my natal chart based on everything that I was learning and researching. I started moving my body in ways aligned to my astrological constitution. And the luckiest thing throughout all of this, the Saturn year I had last year, Saturn is our wisest teacher. I was so immersed in helping everyone else. Saturn was like, well, the teacher is only as great as the experiences that they've had. And so I do feel like every health challenge I've had has equipped me to then be able to teach from experience. And the lucky thing about this entire story is over the last 2.5 years, I see guests at Gwingana, which is a lifestyle retreat here on the Gold Coast. It's won so many awards. I'm so grateful to connect with guests there. Is that I see guests for astrology, and so many of them are so intrigued, not by just astrology, but the health conversation we have through the lens of their stars. So during this time, I've been able to test theories, I offer up wellness practices, give insight into what they should look like or feel like, and the feedback and the results has absolutely taken my breath away. I'm not a practitioner and I don't pretend to be, and even during my own health challenges, I have people in my corner always supporting me. But I've come to realize that to live a life of vitality and energy and well-being, it definitely does take a mind, body, spirit approach. And there's practices, rituals, and ways that we can approach life to become the best version of ourselves. And that's why I've been, if you've seen it online, or you might have heard me mention it, this is why I've been developing the STAR method as a way to show you too. I don't want to just teach astrology, as there's so many amazing astrology courses out there from incredible astrologers I learn from too. But instead, I wanted to be able to offer up a new way of living and an approach to the stars which will help you focus on supporting your soul and your life from a mind, body, spirit perspective. Right now, my morning and evening routines look very different than what they used to. I bookend my day with nourishing actions, like reading on my Kindle, as I can read more and faster because there's no distractions on that. I've actually read 35 books this year and counting. Knowledge that comes from reading I find is invaluable, and it has given me perspective, probably more so than anything else. I meditate every day. I remember being the person that was like, I kept telling myself the same story, I'm going to meditate, but never did it. And I do that every morning. I always think of Tony Robbins in this regard. He always says, when you wake up, it's so important to change your state. And I do that through meditation. At the moment, I'm using the Melissa Wood Health app because I love the voice of hers and Nettie's meditations. And I do this in front of my red light because the red light is helping with healing my body. And I even have stopped drinking coffee as soon as I wake up, and I've switched to decaf to start my day. So I'm definitely working less than I have done in years. It might look like I do a lot, and I absolutely do. I make sure that when I work, I do focused work, so it's not distracted work like it used to. I'm definitely not on 24/7. I used to live and breathe my work, and I still do, but I have healthy boundaries around taking care of myself, because I do know, and I tell this often to the people I connect with, I may have told you too in session, is you cannot pour from an empty cup. Even all the rituals that I'm doing, nothing feels like a to-do list. Life feels in alignment, and for the first time ever, everything is tailored to my soul's blueprint, and my soul's blueprint is my natal chart. And it's definitely been a journey. Even sharing this with you today has felt like a journey. And if you've made it this far, I'm very grateful that you're here. But I'm definitely the first to say that I'm not perfect, and I'm absolutely still learning, and I will always crave the need to know more. Thank you so much, my South Node in Sagittarius. But what I have found is peace and happiness and fulfillment and excitement, because I choose and declare today that the next 29 years I'm going to approach differently, because what I have realized is that I am enough, and that, my beautiful friend, is progress. If anything from this episode resonated with you, or maybe you can relate in some way, then I would so love to hear from you. Of course, I'm not going anywhere, and you know what I'm about to say. I'll be back tomorrow for regular programming, but until then, keep exploring the stars within and without.